This is Mike Winger, one of the most popular Christian apologists here on YouTube. His channel is called Mike Winger, Learn to Think Biblically, and has like 600,000 followers, so yeah, a lot of people listening to this guy. And his latest video, 20 Questions with Pastor Mike, Winger said something so mind-boggling and bizarre and kinda nasty that I just had to comment on it. Here, Mike is going to argue why homosexuality is unnatural, and I'm gonna respond as to why this take is complete nonsense. It's gonna be a more informal conversation, it's gonna get messy, but hopefully you gain something out of it. Thank you for joining me, guys. So Mike begins the Q&A session by talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, and as you can imagine, he of course holds the opinion that Sodom and Gomorrah is a commentary against homosexuality. We already made a video on this, go check it out if you haven't, in which I argued that no, Sodom and Gomorrah was a commentary against inhospitality and against the bad treatment of strangers, but of course Mike has to make it all about the gays, which was never the case, but Christian apologists gotta do their thing, I guess. But I want to focus on the comments he makes shortly after, because here Mike is going to give his rationale on why he thinks homosexuality is wrong.
So yeah, if it is true that loving is a license for sexual relationships, then those who are on the pro, same-sex marriage and pro same-sex relationship side, answer me this. Seriously, answer me this. How do you not apply this to a father and daughter who want to have an incestuous relationship? As long as she's on the pill. Because you could say, well, the children could be, have genetic issues. Yeah, well, she'll just take the pill. Or maybe she's infertile. So what would be the problem with a father and daughter having intimate relationships? Maybe it's loving and consensual. No, it's against design. It's against nature. It's against morality. That's just wrong. What about a mother and a son? What about a father and a son? You can't construct a good argument that doesn't also show homosexuality as a problem. What about a brother and sister? What about two brothers? Two brothers intimate together. What would be wrong with that? It's not according to design. It's unnatural.
I couldn't believe my little ears after hearing this rant. Well, actually, I'm just kidding. I totally could, because Christian fundamentalists employ this false equivalent all the time. What apologists often do is group all sexual acts they consider deviant into one single category, equally as bad. For example, they often mention homosexuality along with other things like bestiality, incest, and even worse, child abuse. Apologists seemingly can't or don't want to tell the difference between these things and a homosexual relationship between two consenting adults. So since Mike asked us nicely to address his question, I'm gonna provide an answer for you, my dude. Homosexuality and incest are not the same thing. Incest is wrong because we as a society have decided it's wrong. Because our ancestors noticed that when a brother and a sister have a child together, these babies tend to come out with terrible deficiencies. So, over the centuries, we have collectively agreed that incest is wrong and harmful. Of course, this was not always the case. Marriage between siblings used to be the norm in some ancient and not so ancient societies, such as the Egyptians and some European royal families. But not anymore. Me as an atheist don't have to invoke a divine authority to agree with you that incest is wrong and harmful. We can make the case that incest, at least in the case of our species, is unnatural because it can produce awful birth defects. But even if we're talking about an incestuous relationship where there is no procreation involved, because Mike got really specific with it, like, a relationship between a father and a daughter where there's no procreation, or between two brothers. Both Mike Winger and me can agree that this is wrong because we as a society have decided it's taboo, it's not good.
Here it says, you shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. That's about as clear as it can possibly be. Motives don't matter. Nothing else matters. Just men go with women and women go with men, and that's how it works. And you shall not, let me read on though, because I want to counter an objection I'll get. And you shall not lie with any animal so as to make yourself unclean with it. Neither shall any woman give herself to an animal to lie with it. It is perversion. Okay, most people would agree with that. Bestiality is being wrong, although Some people in our culture right now are not agreeing with that because they realize that once you cast off the idea of design and you think that desire equals design, if I want this, then that's how I'm meant to have it. Then you can't, that's the basis of that whole homosexual thing. Once you feel that once the desire is your design, then if you start desiring animals, what are the rules? How do you make rules about this? Just do it in a safe way. Try to make it consensual somehow, or something like that. You can't stop the perversion from rolling downhill. It's not possible.
In the case of bestiality, having relations with animals, we have also agreed that this is not good. First of all, an animal cannot give consent. Second, you can get some horrible diseases by performing this. I feel sick just talking about this. Why are you talking about this, Mike? No, homosexual relations between two consenting adults that are not related is not the same thing as incest or bestiality. Not even close. But apologists like Mike often mention them together to push a slippery slope fallacy. This is meant to rile up their viewers' emotions into a frenzy. So Mike is basically suggesting that if we as a society decide homosexual relations are good, they're okay, then this is gonna lead our society to start accepting other things like incest and bestiality.
You can't stop the perversion from rolling downhill. It's not possible.
No, Mike, it doesn't. If society starts accepting homosexual people and relationships, this doesn't mean they're gonna accept relations with animals or with siblings or with children, because we have collectively decided that these things are awful and in many cases illegal. You see, Mike, the thing about morality, about human morality, is that the society we are raised in has a huge effect on our moral values. Surprise, surprise. Even Christians today would never engage in behavior that Christians from past generations often engaged in, such as burning witches at the stake or persecuting Jewish people. But why is that? Because our society has decided that those things are archaic and a thing of the past, even though these people still remain Christian and still believe in the Bible. Societies and moral values change and evolve over time, Mike. As a society here in the West, more and more people are starting to realize that, hey, a consensual relationship between two men and two women is not harming anyone.
And they tend to just get more mad at you. No matter the fact that the CDC backs up statistics that show this is a dangerous lifestyle that shortens your lifespan, right? That's not relevant. We're just angry because we love this thing more than God, is the bottom line.
In his video, Mike tries to argue that homosexuality is unnatural because, according to the CDC, gay men are more prone to catch sexually transmitted diseases than heterosexual couples. But instead of directly quoting from his supposed sources, Mike just mentions the CDC very briefly and tells us to do our own research.
This is offensive to people, but I think what's being offended is your rebellion against God. I think what's being offended is your desire to cast off God's own design and against all reason. Even if you were just a pure secular evolutionist, I think you could fairly look at homosexuality and say, this isn't really healthy. I think you could do that, physically healthy. You could go look at the CDC statistics on these things. Please check it out on AIDS, on other things like that. Check it out.
But it seems Mike forgot about all the STDs that can be spread through heterosexual relations, and that's not even counting all the unwanted pregnancies. He also tries to argue that homosexuality is unnatural because it cannot lead to procreation.
And you look at the fact that you no longer have a family. Even if you adopt kids in a same-sex relationship, there's no mother or there's no father. You've cut off that family unit that if you're an evolutionist, then you think this family unit is what stood the test of time. This is what seems to be the optimal way of raising people, even just on an evolutionary standard. And then you've killed that. You've ruined that. That's so sad. You will never have your own kids. You're basically committed to infertility if you commit to these lifestyles. That's a sad thing.
Well, guess what, Mike? Not every human being wants children. And the Jewish Messiah you worship didn't have children either. Does that make you sad as well? If a gay couple wants to adopt children that are withering away in an orphanage and provide them with a loving and stable upbringing, let it be. Sure, same-sex couples can't have children on their own because, that's how biology works, but many heterosexual couples decide to take birth control or get a vasectomy. Wouldn't that be considered unnatural as well? Those straight couples are disrupting their reproductive systems God has given them. Why does Mike not feel sad for them as well?
Now, some people think we need to get rid of a bunch of humans on the earth. I'm not one of those people, so.
No one is saying that, you little peanut. It's just that raising kids nowadays, it's really expensive, and not everyone has the position or the desire to have children.
But they never viewed love as a license for sexual relationships. We do now. Now we do. We're all raised on TV shows that are like, when you feel you're ready, you're ready. You can do it. When you're really in love, that's when it's time to be intimate together. And back in the past, people would be like, well, you got to get married. You got to have this life commitment to each other. I think people in the past were smarter, okay? Smarter than we are on this issue, for sure.
Yeah, people in the past also believed that the earth was flat and that witches should be burned on the stake and that ritually sacrificing animals could lead to the forgiveness of sins and that demons were the cause of mental illness. Maybe we should be really selective on the moral values we inherit from our ancestors.
Leviticus 18 forbids all those things the same. And it says that God judges Gentiles for those very things.
Leviticus 18 is a text written by ignorant primitives who thought bats were birds and that homosexuals should be put to death for having consensual sex. I don't feel we should use Leviticus as a moral guide, Mike. Christians love bringing Leviticus up only when it's convenient to them, even though none of the laws in the book even apply to them anymore. So let me cut right to the chase and tell you why I think arguing homosexuality is unnatural is complete nonsense. When it comes down to it, Mike, the only reason you consider homosexuality to be unnatural is because your holy text tells you it is. A text that, let me remind you, is packed with scientifically ludicrous statements. The natural world is actually brimming with creatures that display homosexual behaviors, creatures that change their sex, and lots of incest. Homosexuality is very common in nature and it's actually beneficial to some species. It's a very natural thing. But guess what, Mike? Animals also engage in all sorts of things which we consider wrong, such as incest, cannibalism, and sex slavery. So basing our morality solely on the natural world is silly. It's not how human morality works. Human morality is incredibly complex. Like I mentioned before, our values have evolved over time. What was considered taboo in the past could be acceptable in the future. Our society, at least here in the West, in the United States, has become more accepting of homosexual relationships. I mean, not everyone, of course, because as long as we have religion in the way, there's gonna be people like Mike Winger who resist progress. I just think that our fellow human beings from the LGBTQ community deserve the same rights as we do. Is that too much to ask, Mike? Can we start moving on as a species towards a better treatment for all people? You can claim homosexuality is wrong only on the basis of your holy book. The Bible does condemn homosexuality in a few passages, but that doesn't matter. We don't live in a theocracy, and our laws should not be based on the Bible. So, Mike, if you want to hold on to your dogma, you are completely free to do so. But once you try to argue that homosexuality is unnatural, you're just coming off as a silly clown because it seems you never watched the nature documentary. Homosexuality is very common in nature, and it's just as natural as being straight. And it's my opinion that both sexual behaviors are good when expressed between two consenting adults. Of course, you're free to disagree with me on this, but please stop pretending that nature is on your side on this argument. It's absolutely not, and you should stop pretending it is because you just sound silly as hell. And the reason I wanted to comment on these couple of clips from Mike Winger is because his rhetoric can actually be really harmful to the Christians that identify as gay, as bisexual, as trans, to all these people that grow up in very religious households and are sometimes kicked out of their houses for being gay.
So my encouragement is this: if you're someone who's same-sex attracted, I don't feel any negative feelings to you whatsoever. I think you're dealing with a temptation, just like I deal with temptations. And my encouragement to you would be to know that that attraction, that desire, is not your friend. That's a temptation that can mess up your life. It goes against God's design.
Mike claims that he doesn't hate the LGBT community. He puts on this facade of being loving and tolerant, but the thing is, his message, his rhetoric, drives some LGBT folks to hate themselves, to think they're defective, they're falling short of what God expects from them. And the thing is, Mike is not the only one who parrots this idea. Most fundamentalists here on YouTube use the same tired arguments against homosexuality, and it's gotten really, really old.
The loving thing to do is to love God in that, and to die to yourself, and to conduct yourself properly. I'm not saying you're going to pray it away. I think people don't find that their desires just suddenly disappear, but they do find that when they're not yielding into them, when they don't feed them with pornography and feed them with flirtations and relationships and hookups, when you don't feed it, it tends to be less over time. Initially, it feels like more, and then you kind of break through that barrier, and then you find that you're better than you were before, even though it's not gone.
Here, Mike tries to argue that homosexuality is mostly caused by pornography and by the modern hookup culture or something, but he kind of forgets that there's always been gay people around, and he wants to paint homosexual desire, homosexual feelings, as something that needs to be overcome, when it's just a normal experience for some people.
So I'm not asking you to reject your design. That's how it feels. That's what our world is telling you right now.
Gaslighting 101. You feel gay because that's what our world is telling you to feel. It's not because you're just being honest with your feelings. It's just the world telling you to be gay.
Is that your desires are your design? And I'm saying, no, your design is boy. Your design is girl. And your design is so that you might mate with the opposite. That's your design. Your desires are contrary to your design, and that's not healthy, and that's not helpful, and that's a struggle. Don't yield into it. Your identity is male or female. Your identity is based on physical stuff, and the proper desires, if you're not feeling those, at least don't feed the desires. And
you can imagine how incredibly destructive this advice can be to someone from the LGBTQ community growing up in a religious household. It's horrible.
Go into them that go the wrong direction. That would be my counsel to you, if for whatever it's worth. And we'll see if my YouTube channel gets taken down. All right.
Gotta play that persecution card as always, right, Mike?
You're given over to greed. It identifies your life. You're a thief. You're a reviler. You're a man who practices homosexuality. This is on the list in the New Testament of people who don't inherit the kingdom of God. It's super, super hateful as far as the world's concerned. But here Paul does it out of love. Think about this. He says this out of love because he doesn't want people to be deceived. He goes, I don't want you to be tricked into thinking you can just live in rebellion against God and his design and his love and get away with it.
I'm not a pastor, guys. I'm just some guy in the internet. But I do have a message for you. Please be kind. People from the LGBTQ community have suffered long enough under these religious institutions, and now that they can enjoy a few more rights and representation, at least in the Western world, fundamentalists like Mike Winger just can't let them be, and they have to pitch in and just try to make their lives harder than they are already. And you know what? I'm sure Mike deep down is a nice dude. I'm sure he has good intentions behind making YouTube videos, even if his apologetics are pretty terrible most of the time. But dude, your rhetoric is harmful and antiquated. It can have devastating effects on others. It's the 21st century. It's time to move on. The LGBTQ community deserves the same rights everyone else has. And if you are part of the community, just know that you have my love and that I wish you the very best. Just be a good person, be kind, and don't listen to the Mike Wingers of the world who, at the end of the day, have nothing to back up their claims but a silly old book that they cling to.